Welcome in, everybody, to the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast, powered by Full-Time Fantasy and the FFWC. I am your host, Billy Muzio, and with me tonight, Jody Smith, my co-host, and we're just going to be talking camp battles tonight. We're going to be walking through the NFL, discussing players that we want to keep an eye on through camp. If we have time, we're going to be running through our Scott Fishbowl teams. But Jody, how you doing tonight, buddy?
Doing good, man. Watching the Astros owning the Yankees yet again. I mean, it's kind of getting repetitive at this point, but it was kind of cool that we decided we're just going to do a little casual gig today. I don't have to do any prep or whatever, so that's why I'm here in the living room with the big TV as opposed to in the office where I usually would be recording with the small TV.
Awesome. Well, we're keeping it casual tonight. What is maybe let's go through, but what is the number one camp battle that you are excited to watch play out starting next week when teams hit the field and get into training camp? What is the number one camp battle that you are looking forward to for your fantasy football team heading into 2022?
Well, I mean, there's just so much to watch for. It's hard to come up with one. I mean, the ones to me that are, the most relevant are the couple of teams that are looking at a quarterback battle, and that's with Seattle first and foremost, because I know the Seahawks have over under 4.5 wins or whatever. We're not expecting a lot, but I talked earlier this week about it's kind of interesting if Geno Smith wins that battle. It's probably really, really good news for DK Metcalf because I went back and looked, and Geno Smith threw 5 touchdown passes last year when he came in relief of Russell Wilson. Well, 4 of them went to DK Metcalf. One of them came from outside of 80 yards. So, I mean, this would be like, a great development for them. I mean, in all reality, it's not like we're putting a lot of emphasis on Seattle this year per se, but there's some interesting players there. You've got Rashad Penny, who we like, and a lot of people are on Kenneth Williams. So there's the backfield potential there. And then, of course, we just talked about Metcalf, and Tyler Lockett's one of the most consistent receivers in football. And, I mean, even with Drew Lock or Geno under center, I mean, Tyler Lockett's ADP is what, in the 40s at this point?
Wide receiver 45 on average right now at FFWC.
He's like a screaming value because, I mean, I know he was dealing with Russell Wilson, but it seems like really, really like we're expecting this massive drop-off for a guy that's annually, top 15 or top 20 for his value to be basically only half what it was. It seems like a big drop-off for a team that's going to see a lot of favorable game scripts, regardless of who's under center.
Who do you think, as of today, if you had to peg a starter for 2022 for Seattle, who are you pegging?
Probably Geno. It figures to me he's got the edge in familiarity with the staff, with the offense they probably want to try to run, and he wasn't that bad. He hasn't been that bad, under for them. I guess. I mean, he's been tolerable, but again, and it's not like Geno Smith last year for a 4-game stretch for a team that ultimately was a last place team was comparable to what Drew Lock did in Denver. So I don't know. I mean, I want to say it's a situation to avoid, but I was just saying how there's quite a bit of fantasy potential in Seattle. So to me, that's why it's one of the more significant things I want to watch next month is to see if either one of these quarterbacks gets a huge edge over the other. And if they look, if they can even look modest, then we could start pumping up Tyler Lockett in our rankings and we can keep DK Metcalf, who I think in our projections, we have him around wide receiver 18 or 20. So we're still relatively higher on him than a lot of other people are. And that's because as the main culprit here that's been writing our projections, I actually expect Geno Smith to kind of win that job. Now, I'm not saying he's going to start 17 games for them, but I'm kind of expecting. I mean, it might do Seattle. I mean, they really need to tear it down and think about starting over. So it might benefit them to go with Geno, but we'll see.
Geno was surprisingly kind of sneaky good last year. 68.5% completion percentage, 95 passing attempts. So it was only 4 games. But if you look at the game log, he consistently got better. You look at week 5 is when he started. 5, 6, 7, 8 was those 4 weeks. Week 5 finished as quarterback 26. Week 6, quarterback 25. Week 7, quarterback 20. Week 8, quarterback number 8. So he consistently was getting better as he was getting more comfortable with the offense, getting that chemistry with the players. Didn't have the best, or the most touchdowns. He threw for 2 in week 8 and then 1 in every other week, but he only threw for 1 interception in that 4-week span. So 1 interception to his 5 touchdowns. So not horrible ratio there either. So people also, fail to look at his statistics from or his metrics, I should say. And yes, it's Geno Smith. He's nothing to just be, blown away by, but he was serviceable is where I'm trying to get to, right? I agree they probably need to tear it down, but 100% agree with you. The splits with DK Metcalf on the field with Geno Smith and the splits without Geno Smith in the field, it was clear and evident that Geno Smith favored DK Metcalf. He's a big-bodied receiver. He can throw it up and just let him take it down. That's kind of what we want to see from DK Metcalf in the fantasy world anyways. We just want to see his receiver or his quarterback just trust in him and get him the ball. So that's one camp battle I'm really looking forward to. The other one is going to be Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold. Right, both these guys were top 3 picks in the 2018 draft. Baker went 101. We had Sam Darnold who went 103. Both on the Panthers now. Both have never been that great in terms of their draft capital that was spent on them. Neither of them have finished above quarterback 24 in any given season. That was Sam Darnold in 2021 last year. Prior to that, it was either 26 or below for both of them. Who do you think wins this job in Carolina, and what does it mean for the likes of Christian McCaffrey? What does it mean for the likes of Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore, sophomore now Terrace Marshall? Who is going to benefit the most from either quarterback, and who does that who in your mind is that quarterback going to be in the beginning of 2022?
Baker's winning that job. It won't be close. Matt Rule's really playing for his job at this point. They probably should have cut ties with him last year ahead of this year, but they didn't. So this is kind of a desperation ploy for him. He's got to get out there and put the best quarterback on the field that's going to potentially resurrect his career, even though it's probably too late for that. And that's Baker, and it shouldn't be close. I was just writing, I told you about that massive 5,500 word piece monster that I was working on today, but I wrote that, it won't even be close to me that Baker's going to beat out Sam Darnold, and that's not even saying much. But it'll be good news overall for everyone in Carolina. But the sneaky play here is Rashard Higgins, who has the potential to step up and win the wide receiver 3 role for them because he has that rapport with Baker already. Now, Higgins, he's not someone you want to go out of your way to draft and all that. But if you're in an expanded 20-something man roster and you're looking for depth, or you're in a dynasty and it's a waiver run or whatever, he's somebody that might be able to win that wide receiver 3 role and could potentially be looking at scooping up 40, 50 passes. But that said, with me projecting Baker to easily win that job, I'm not moving DJ Moore up too much like in our projections, mainly because I never really moved him down because that's how good DJ Moore has been and how consistent he's been. But big benefactor with I want to say that Baker Mayfield had the second best deep ball completion rate outside of Kyler Murray, something I looked at today. So that really stands to benefit Robbie Anderson, who struggled immensely last year with whatever Carolina threw out at quarterback. Clearly it wasn't good news for Robbie Anderson. So now you're throwing in a guy who's consistently has a strong arm and has been able to complete balls downfield. So, plays into Robbie Anderson's ability quite well. And I mean, there's nowhere to go but up for Robbie, right?
Correct. Yeah. Not much further to go down. It was a pretty terrible year last year, 2021. I just had to fact check the deep ball completion percentage. So deep ball completion percentage, 37.9, quarterback 18, not horrible. And deep ball accuracy rating, 5.5, quarterback 26.
All right. Let me pull up what I looked at here.
How to spot check it.
Yeah. While you're Well, you're telling me what you think of who's going to win that battle and what it means for the.
I think it's going to be Baker as well. We've already seen Sam Darnold in this offense. He excelled in the red zone and rushing the ball, but it was clear last year that, as a thrower, he was struggling. Pretty much all the metrics that we just listed, he was worse at than Baker Mayfield. If you look at pass attempts in just, 406 pass attempts. Of course, he didn't play the whole season, but you look at interceptable passes. He was, at 26 interceptable passes. Just all around, just kind of piss poor performance. Pressure completion percentage, middle of the pack. Deep ball completion percentage was quarterback 31. True completion percentage was quarterback 29. Accuracy rating, quarterback number 32. So I think we've already seen what we're getting with Sam Darnold. I know a lot of people are thinking it's going to be a closer competition. I don't. I'm with you here. I think it's going to be Baker Mayfield. I mean, they're going to leave it open, and they're, of course, going to want a competition in camp because they're going to want them both to compete, and they're going to want to have both of them put their best foot forward because it's ultimately going to make this team better. So we're going to hear it's going to be a competition, but I have every faith and belief that it's going to be Baker Mayfield to win the job.
Oh,
and I think –
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, what I was saying about Robbie Anderson. So I might be confusing something else. I mean, I wrote like 6,000 words today. So it's Baker Mayfield, sixth in the league with
just a couple words.
9.2 ADOT. That's why it plays into
ADOT.
the hands of Robbie Anderson. It might be another quarterback that was number 2 in deep ball accuracy.
Yeah, 6,000 words will get to your head sometimes, Jody. That's a lot of words to write in a day.
Yeah, right.
What do you think Baker Mayfield – I'm excited for Baker Mayfield and Christian McCaffrey. I think this is going to be one of the biggest benefactors, I think, of this quarterback competition.
Well, the Browns didn't throw a ton of passes to their running backs, but that's not necessarily Baker. That's, a product of their offense. I mean, Kareem Hunt did just fine as a pass catcher, and Nick Chubb can probably catch some passes too. It just wasn't something that Cleveland and that regime was really playing up. So, it's something I brought up earlier this week is just because a player doesn't necessarily isn't asked to do anything doesn't mean that he can't do it. And the key point there was, we all had that narrative that Leonard Fournette coming out of Bama wasn't going to be out of LSU, wasn't going to be a viable NFL pass catcher because he didn't catch balls in college, but turns out to be, far from the truth. Just because we haven't seen a player do something doesn't mean they can. So, yeah, overall, it's a huge boost for Carolina's, entire offense. Everyone on the team. I think we all have seen what Sam Darnold can't do. We thought he would benefit from a fresh start, getting out of New York, and sometimes I think rarely we see these things happen. But I rooted for Josh Rosen. He got a bad deal the one season in Arizona, and we thought that he'll come over here and he'll get a fresh start. But no, sometimes you just realize quickly that they missed. The teams miss, and just like the whole fantasy community, we all miss all the time too. So it's just best in those instances to move on quickly and just pull forward.
This was actually next on my list. So Stats Guru says, who wins the wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 battles in Green Bay? So we're talking Allen Lazard versus
them and the Chiefs and the Colts. We got to look at who's going to be behind Michael Pittman.
Yeah, so let's talk Green Bay. It's going to be Allen Lazard versus Christian Watson versus Sammy Watkins. Is there another one in the mix here that you are expecting to get any relative playing time? Who are you projecting to be the number 1? Who are you projecting to be the number 2? And who are you projecting to be the number 3?
Well, Lazard's definitely your number 1, and I still think he feels like a really, really good value. He started flashing some really solid chemistry late last year with Aaron Rodgers on the stretch. I want to say in the last 5 games that he exceeded 70 yards 3 times. But what we really love to see is that in Green Bay's final 5 games, Allen Lazard reeled in 5 touchdown receptions, which is exactly what we want to see when you're taking out a huge, probably the premier end zone touchdown scoring receiver in football is gone from that offense. And now you're looking for a big body guy like Allen Lazard. He's what, 6'5", 220, something like that. That's exactly the frame of the player that you're looking for to make an appearance in that area. So, I mean, he's not going to be Devontae Adams. Nobody is, but he's going to be clear cut their wide receiver one. He's going to be given every opportunity, I think. And then there's he's got the years of experience in there. He's got that rapport that he's built up with Aaron Rodgers. After that, maybe we're kind of overlooking Sammy Watkins because, hark back to when Watkins opened up his career really hot with the Bills. I mean, we've been waiting for that so long. It's like it almost feels like a mini version of Josh Gordon, where we saw these glimmer of this fantastic ability early on, and there's still people out there that are still thinking that Josh Gordon is going to come back. It's just how we are, because we see these players. And don't get me wrong, Sammy Watkins was no Josh Gordon, but he was a very viable wideout his first couple of seasons in Buffalo. And we've been kind of thinking that's going to come back out. So that'll be, he's right to bring up Green Bay, because you're now, we got a premier quarterback, but we've got an entire offense that's kind of in transition. I expect, regardless of how the receiving core plays out with Watson and Watkins, Aaron Jones, he was second on Green Bay last year in targets with 65. And I believe, as usual, he missed a couple of games. So, I mean, Aaron Jones, really sneaky bet to maybe step up over to 80, 90 targets, maybe to be used out of the slot a lot. And, this is something I don't think that I remembered this, but do you know A.J. Dillon actually led Green Bay in rushing last year?
I knew it wasn't by much, but it's
close.
Yeah, it's
but
close.
We started to see him pull away, starting to get more of those short yardage carries.
He was also getting passing down work.
Right. And that's kind of what, I figure that makes a ton of sense. When you take out one, probably the best wideout in the game, and you take them out, well, you've got to think proactively, and getting your best players on a field is a good way to do that. And having Dillon in the backfield and Aaron Jones split out in the slot, or maybe even split out wide, seems like the best case scenario for Green Bay to me.
Yeah, I think the benefit here with all these guys, whether it's Sammy Watkins, Allen Lazard, Christian Watson, Randall Cobb, Romeo Dubes, I mean, you can pretty much throw in a couple other names in here as well. But regardless, the one benefit that all of these guys have is they have Aaron Rodgers throwing the ball, right? Somebody is going to be fantasy relevant in this offense. And I'm impressed, Jody. You went through and said, I think he had a couple of 70-yard games down the stretch.
Three out of 5, I believe.
You hit the hammer on the nail. Week 14, 75 yards. Week 17, 72 yards. Week 18, 75 yards. He had 2 touchdowns, 1 touchdown, and 1 touchdown each of those games. He had a touchdown in between as well.
And if I'm not mistaken, 5+ grabs in all 3 of those games.
Correct. Yep. And so week 14, he finished as wide receiver 8. Week 17, wide receiver 14. Week 18, wide receiver 12. So multiple top 20 wide receiver finishes. The other game in between, wide receiver 29. It's clear that Rodgers has the confidence in Lazard as a target. My only concern with Lazard, and I'm high on Lazard. I was quoted on the Player Profiler podcast with Matt Kelly on the Dominator that I would take Allen Lazard ahead of MVS. I'd take Allen Lazard ahead of Claypool. I would take Allen Lazard ahead of Chris Godwin without question, right? And a lot of people kind of clap back at that. I don't expect to have Godwin on the field. That's throwing that out there right now. Godwin's probably going to miss 4, 6, 8 games. We don't know, but I'm going to expect him to be gone at least that 4 to 6 range on a minimum. My only question with Lazard is, does he have the skills needed to be the number one guy? He's always played opposite of Devontae Adams, right? And he hasn't ever acquired that number one cornerback kind of to shadow him. How does he step up with that number one cornerback or the best defender on the team who's going to be shadowing him on routes or playing toe-to-toe with him? How does he react to that? Is he going to let him be pushed around, or is he going to step up to the plate? I think it's clear that Rodgers trusts him.
Right.
That's my only fear. Watson, on the other hand, does not have the trust of Aaron Rodgers yet, but has the body frame and the metrics to be a number one in this league. 6'4", 210 pounds. Ran a 4.3 640. Speed score of 98th percentile. Burst score 95th percentile. Catch radius 97th percentile. The dude's a freak athlete, right? He can go up and make the catches. How does that talent translate to the NFL, I think, is the main question. I agree with you, though. I think that Allen Lazard is the clear number one in this offense. I think Watson probably falls in that number 2 range. Romeo Dubes, a sneaky one, because Dubes also returns punts, so we're going to get fantasy points from punt returns, from kick returns, however they utilize him on the field. So it'd be interesting to see how they work him in, how they work in, what is it, Amari Rogers, I think is the other one, right? How are they going to work him into the fold? There's a lot of different ways that this offense is going to pan out, but either way you chop it, dice it, slice it, doesn't matter. Allen Lazard, to me, is the number one receiver in this offense. Next up, let's take a look. Let's do a couple. We haven't done a running back yet. Let's do Devin Singletary versus Zach Moss. Zach Moss just
Moss. You mean James Cook?
Sorry, yes, James Cook and Zach Moss. Sorry, James Cook. That's who I meant. They drafted James Cook this year in the draft. Word on the street, he's going to be satellite back, relief, Singletary 1 and 2 downs. Are you nervous at all? Singletary is going to lose or succeed a lot of work to James Cook in this backfield, or do you think this is the Devin Singletary show?
I think, look at James Cook, terrific pass catcher in college, and they've already kind of started hyping him up as that's the kind of role that we're going to see him take over here in the pros. However, he's undersized. Singletary's not the biggest guy either, but we saw what he could do down the stretch last season. If you didn't have Rashad Penny last year carrying your team to a fantasy championship, there's a good chance Devin Singletary was really helping somebody else at that point. Now, we can't expect that kind of momentum to carry over into 2022. However, I think it's pretty clear that they now trust him. Zach Moss, it won't surprise me to see him not even make the roster at this point. I think it's time to that ship has sailed, and if anything, they brought in Duke Johnson to be their RB3, and he's from a standpoint of getting out there and he's a solid RB3. He can fill in basically on any down as a change of pace role. But I really like Singletary. He's a guy that Billy, I think it was you and I who were talking earlier this week that normally what's become the trendy topic in fantasy circles is that running back dead zone, and that's typically that 4th through 6th round area where you're in RB 25 through RB 40. Generally, it's advisable to avoid that area. So if you don't start your fantasy draft off with 2 running backs in the first 2 rounds, the general consensus is you just hold off altogether. But we're starting to see this a little interesting depth because we have guys like Devin Singletary, Rashad Penny, and you can even throw James Cook, who, since we're on the topic, they're in that running back dead zone area. And to me, there's a lot of potential, this season that now I'm not a hashtag 0 RB guy, not in any case. I don't generally commit to any sort of strategy. I like to just sit back and just watch how the draft, falls, because being flexible is one of the most important attributes that any drafter can do. Being open and being willing to realize, hey, when others are zigging, I'm going to zag. But this year, I'm a little more open to thinking about maybe focusing on wideouts early, because I'm starting to become more and more. I feel like this whole dead zone. There's some depth this year. Like I said, Devin Singletary, he's a guy I have a ton of. I hate to say the word shares because just seems so awkward, but he's a guy that I've rostered in a ton of leagues because
roster shift's the new word, Jody. Roster shift.
Okay, I got to be woke, or wait, not woke. Whatever the good one is. But I keep noticing that I keep getting Singletary, and in an ideal world, if he's your RB3, if you were able to start off with a couple of top 20, 25 guys, and you're able to get Devin Singletary as your wide receiver 3, and hopefully at that point it's 6th, 7th, 8th round. Well, at that point, you've got your receiving core filled out too. And you know me, I'm not taking a tight end that early generally, but I'm pretty happy if I can get a guy like Singletary, as a potential flex play, or even if you're in an antiquated league that only has one flex, something like that, I'm more than happy to have him. He's a great. I feel like Singletary's a really good best ball pick. And the thing is, I like James Cook too. We talked about him all throughout the summer. You're going through the the full-time fantasy table, that you did a fantastic job with your breakdowns and the media of putting it out there for the readers to enjoy. I really enjoyed watching his film. I really enjoyed writing him up, and I think both of us are intrigued. Is that the right word for James?
Yeah, I think intrigued is the perfect word. I think Buffalo, though, telegraphed what they wanted to do with James Cook. I mean, they went out and they tried to acquire J.D. McKissick prior to the draft. He was apparently signed for a couple hours, changed his mind, went back to Washington. They go out and draft James Cook. To me, that signals that they want to utilize James Cook in the same fashion they planned on utilizing J.D. McKissick. He's a passing down back, going to be mixed in, right? That satellite scat back, right? And James Cook is much more than that as a player. But I think it's clear what Buffalo wants to use him in, because you look down the stretch and you hit the hammer on the nail. If you did not have Rashad Penny on your championship team, very likely you had Devin Singletary, because when you look down the stretch, weeks 15 through 17, both of them were tied as their RB1 in PPR leagues, 58.4 fantasy points, weeks 15 through 17. If you add in week 18, doesn't matter because none of us play fantasy football in week 18. Devin Singletary is the running back 1 in football for those final few weeks. So Singletary was coming on hot. I mean, very hot. And just how hot, he finished week 17 with 19 touches. Or was that? Sorry, 19 routes. Sorry. That's going to be 23 carries, 110 yards, 2 touchdowns. Week 8, then you get, this is in the playoffs too. So then week 18, 19 touches, 112 yards, 2 more touchdowns. Playoffs continue, 16 touches, 2 more touchdowns, 94 yards, right? He was not just utilized in the rushing game. He was utilized in the passing game down the stretch too. Yep. Tampa Bay, week 14, seven targets, 6 receptions, 89 yards. Week 15, he had that really long reception, 96 yards. Touchdown, that inflated the numbers a little bit. 6 more targets, 5 more receptions, 78 yards, and another touchdown in the air in week 16. So Singletary was very versatile. Came on hot for this offense, a big reason why they had a lot of successes down the stretch. I just don't think he's just going to hand the keys over, though, to James Cook. James Cook, again, blazing speed, 4.42, 94th percentile. Under 200 pounds, though, so I think they're going to form a good 1-2 punch in this offense and give them some much-needed relief in this backfield.
Hey, did you know that he's Dalvin Cook's brother?
Yes, I did know that. Yes. Dalvin's Cook brother. So I'm excited to see this camp battle. Either way, both of them right now in drafts. We have Devin Singletary is going as pick 77, the FFWC, running back 29. James Cook is going as running back 36 at pick 96, so about 20 picks later in ADP. So pick your poison, whichever way you want to go. But both can be had relatively cheap in drafts. So I agree with you that running back dead zone or the 0 running back builds this year have a lot of merit to them because of the value at the position late in drafts. I've never, ever in my life been a 0 running back builder, ever. I mean, you look at my rankings last year. Like the only thing I was truly, excelled in was running backs. I've always hung my hat.
I came up in the glory days of the mid to late '90s when running backs dominated everything. So yeah, I'm on board with that strategy. I mean, it makes sense, but
yeah, there's merit to it. But this year in particular, it makes sense because there's so much value at the running back position late in drafts. When you can get a Rashad Penny, you can get a Chase Edmonds, you can get a Devin Singletary, all these guys in rounds 8, 9, 10. I mean, you can go straight wide receiver tight end if you want in the beginning, or just all wide receivers. So there's a lot of value at the running back position this year. Devin Singletary and James Cook are both to add to that list. How about Jose read my mind. How about Marlon Mack versus Pierce?
Wow. I think, Billy, I think you and I have been kind of team Marlon Mack early on, but
Hmm.
the more I've thought about the Texans offense, the more I'm kind of wary of that situation. That said, it's not an offense that I want a lot of investment in this year. But that said, we know Davis Mills far exceeded expectations. But the biggest issue for me with the backfield is Rex Burkhead, Marlon Mack coming off of an Achilles, which we know
2
is
years removed.
generally a death sentence for running backs. But and we have Damian Pierce, who we all kind of liked coming out. So the early tea leaves, I think, were favoring Pierce, but it feels like in the last, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks or so, a lot of us here in the business have kind of started maybe warming back up to Mac a little bit. I think we read maybe Roto World it was that said that they're kind of expecting that Mac is going to be if anything, maybe it's a veteran courtesy, but it feels like he's going to be the 1A when the Texans hit camp. And I kind of wish that I had credentials again, because it wouldn't be a bad thing necessarily for me to sit back and be able to watch, because I knew back in 2016 when I had credentials, I was able to tell, okay, they're going to use the hell out of Lamar Miller because I was
When you say
watching.
hold up, when you say credentials, you're talking about be on the field press passes.
Oh yeah. I used
Yeah.
to. It's to the point where I don't bother applying for them anymore because this is my wheelhouse now. This is so it's just more beneficial for me not to. But back in the day, when I kind of was thinking of maybe I'm going to try to go into NFL writing. So I was with USA Today, and I kind of thought maybe I'm gonna go that route, but that's not necessarily how things worked out. But it was interesting because the perspective, I was able to go to all of the practices, including the closed ones, and I was able to tell, like, man, they're really going to use Lamar Miller. And this goes back a while, but the concern was because Miller was not the biggest back, so we thought that they weren't necessarily going to use him in short yards. They did, and I could tell early on that they were going to do it. Now he didn't end up being all that because, well, Bill O'Brien. Well, we don't need to talk about him, but harps back to what we have today, and it's just an unknown backfield. I still feel like if your approach, and your approach probably should be this, if you're best ball or you're looking for upside, I would still favor Pierce. However, I feel like Marlon Mack is probably going to open with the chance and to be the 1A, or to maybe even be the lead dog. And let's say this about Marlon Mack. It's a good story. I hope he actually can get the opportunity, because he showed glimpses even after the injury of being a pretty credible running back. And he's a solid receiver, and he's always had a really good nose for the end zone. You look at his stats since he's been in the league, he's got pretty impressive. I think he's got at least a 6 touchdown and an 8 touchdown campaign with the Colts. And that was with him always splitting touches with somebody else. So
Marlon Mack finished 2018 prior to the Achilles injury as running back 21 in PPR leagues, averaged 14.8 fantasy points, 195 attempts, 908 rushing yards, 9 touchdowns, only 17 receptions, 103 receiving yards, one more score. However, he was running back 23 in juke rate, running back 18 innovative tackles, running back 15 in yards created, running back 22 in breakaway rate, running back 16 rushing yards.
These are all the kind of metrics that you expect to really take a beating after you tear your Achilles. But again, like I said, he had a solid nose for the end zone, and he showed that even a little bit after he came back. It's just that, last year with Indianapolis, he was inactive almost every game. But
look who he's behind.
Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines, who have these definitive roles carved out, so it's not really a surprise.
Exactly.
I think on another team, even with recovering from the injury, I think Matt could have been a useful player last year.
So typically Achilles injuries are a 2-year, recovery timeline. Foreman took 2 years. Mack now is entering year 2 from his Achilles tore in 2020, only played 1 game. And Akers apparently can heal super fast and came back very fast, but that's not the norm and not expected. So we're 2 years removed. Marlon Mack, we're seeing now in mini camps, he was returning punts already. To me, seeing him return punts signals
That's
one
very
that
telling.
one is telling that he is already, way past his healing point. He's now probably has burst back. He has acceleration back because they don't just put people back there to return punts. They put him back there for a reason. So all those elusive ratings I just read, all those breakaway rates, all that stuff probably is back if they have him back there returning punts, at least practicing returning punts. So very telling for me to see him on the field returning punts. I do expect him to be the 1A. And then you look over here at average draft position. And this is one of those scenarios where I'm okay if you take both. Right? I call it stack cuffing. Stack cuff it. The cost to do it is cheap.
Yeah, but
Dameon Pierce.
Yep.
Dameon Pierce is going at pick 110, running back 39, so that's completely doable. And then you have Marlon Mack going at pick 147, running back 53. So easily you can double tap it, lock in whoever you think is going to be the lead back, start him on a week-to-week basis. It's not an ideal situation, but if you have a zero running back team or anchor running back team and you're looking for that second running back and you don't want to take a chance on it, double tap those positions late, grab both of them, and secure that spot. I'm more Team Mack than Team Pierce. I think that Mack has the better chance to do it. Like you said, the veteran presence, has proven track record of success in the NFL, played behind JT last year, wasn't needed. Here he is in Houston and probably going to be utilized a little bit more. We have Jose with another question here. I like this one. Which wide receiver do you think will emerge in Kansas City for 2022?
Yeah, that's really that's one of, like, if you look at the top 5 burning questions heading into training camp from a fantasy football perspective, it's that, because you're taking Tyreek Hill out of that offense. It's almost like removing Devontae Adams from Green Bay. It's like by far the biggest part of that receiving core is now gone. So I think you'll see a revamped offense. Obviously, it's good news for Travis Kelce, but I mean, he's locked into his role. I mean, how much better can Kelce really be? I think we're all kind of expecting, like, if we had to go to Vegas right now and bet our next paycheck on who's going to lead the Chiefs in targets. I mean, Juju Smith-Schuster feels like the safest bet, but he didn't command a lot of attention on the open market. I'm pretty sure he signed a pretty modest 1-year deal.
Yep.
There in Kansas City.
Much cheaper than MVS was, I can tell you that.
We're expecting him to be the out of the slot. So when it comes to predicting targets, he seems like the best bet. And then there's MVS, who has that second gear that can get open. So naturally, some people are thinking, hey, that's what Tyreek Hill did. He was able to get deep. But MVS is not near the athlete, not near as elusive and able in the route runner that Tyreek Hill was. So, there's some risk there with him. It kind of leads me towards being interested in Sky Moore, because he can kind of do everything. Sky Moore can play a little bit in the slot. Sky Moore can line up outside. He's got the size. He's got the speed to where it's going to come down to really, it's one of the top 5 burning things for us to watch this summer, is because let's just say that every year we see it. We see a guy kind of blow up the first couple of weeks of the preseason, and his ADP just takes off. Conceivably, you could see Sky Moore be that guy this year, because if he has a couple of big plays, or he's able to score 2 touchdowns in the first 2 or 3, well, there's only 3 preseason games now.
Yeah,
if he's able to reel in a couple of touchdowns early, and then we have all these clips coming in from on Twitter of him making big plays in camp. Sky Moore's the kind of guy where we can see his current ADP shoot up like 25 spots. And I'm still Team Juju Smith-Schuster guy. I've always been a fan of his game. and it feels like when Smith-Schuster is healthy and he's on the field, he's the kind of guy that you can just plug and play as your lineup because you know he's going to get you 5 or 6 consistent catches every week. And that was with, a haggard Ben Roethlisberger. Now you're bringing in a prime Patrick Mahomes. So, I like Smith-Schuster. Again, he's the safe bet right now. But again, we're talking fantasy football. Both of us, Billy, are very in tune and involved in best ball. So in that aspect, I'm probably more interested in Moore. Not only is he drafted significantly later than Juju, it's that unknown, it's that upside, it's that potential to maybe develop into that game breaker that we all kind of want to see.
Yeah, I think people are just expecting it to be Juju simply based upon his one output in 2020 when he was wide receiver 24 on the season. But if you follow the money, I mean, MVS signed a 3-year, $30 million contract. Call it what you want with Juju's, but Juju's was roughly 1 year, $3 million. A lot of it is incentive based. If he has 40 receptions, it's $500,000. His 50 reception goes to $1 million. 63 receptions for $1.5 million. So he's got a lot of reasons to want to excel in this offense. When you look at what both their skill sets bring to the table, Juju's going to be playing out of the slot a lot, where Tyreek Hill ran, I think it was the 17th most routes out of the slot last year. Don't quote me, but I know it was top 20. And then they bring in MVS to be that deep threat burner that Tyreek also had. So realistically, they're having 2 people on the field who were doing the job of one wide receiver, which I think is going to benefit Kelsey a lot.
That's a really interesting way of looking at it. But you're right.
Yeah, I've been looking at this for a while this way, trying to figure out exactly how they were going to divvy up these totals, and if you look at where Tyreek really excelled, it's of course yards after the catch, but a lot of it was across the field in the slot. So I think it's going to be Juju, just based upon how much they do that. Plus, you look at how much teams used cover 2. And what did cover 2 shell defense do to Patrick Mahomes? It shut down the big plays. Well, where does MVS excel? Yeah. MVS excels down the field in that, burning people. So if they're running cover 2 on him, good luck. You're not going to see as many big boom bust games out of MVS as you may have seen in the past in Aaron Rodgers' offense. But either way, you mentioned Sky Moore, and I just don't see a lot of ways that Sky Moore is going to see the field this year. I think he's great for Dynasty. I think he's going to be a great 2023 play because Juju only signed a 1-year contract. But you look at 2022, and he might be the 4th option in this passing game. I mean, Kelsey's the clear 1. You have Juju to me, who's going to be the 2. MVS to me is the 3. Sky Moore is now the 4th option. Yes, he can do a little bit of everything, but I think that's going to fit into future plans of what they plan to do with this offense.
What's interesting, what you said, that you have 2 players filling one role. Would we as a fantasy community be okay with Juju Smith-Schuster and Marquez Valdes-Scantling dividing up Tyreek Hill's production? Because Hill's been a top 10 wide receiver throughout his entire run in Kansas City. So basically I'm saying is, can you take top 10 fantasy numbers and divide them amongst 2 guys? You might actually end up getting 2 usable weekly assets out of it. If you could split it 50-50, of course. I'm just saying, would we be happy with that? Probably.
Yeah. What are you expecting? Probably wide receiver 2, maybe wide receiver 1 spike weeks, right? You're probably going to be averaging back in wide receiver 2, back in.
I don't have his numbers in front of me, but what is a typical season for Tyreek Hill is what? 90 catches, 1,300 yards, and 10 touchdowns, somewhere along those lines. So
pretty close. Yeah, he had 111 receptions last year, 159 targets, 1,200 yards, 9 receiving touchdowns. So prior to that, year before, almost on the dot, 87 receptions. So you're close to 90, 135 targets, 15 touchdowns. So you split that up, and you're talking about 50-ish receptions each.
50 catches, 600 yards, and 6 touchdowns. I mean, if you were to, that probably is the numbers I would be okay with out of MVS. And of course, he's going multiple rounds after Juju Smith-Schuster. If that's the kind of numbers that Juju puts up in Kansas City, I would say that his 1 year tenure there would be a disappointment. I think we're all kind of still hoping that old school Juju Smith-Schuster on a 1 year contract year, kind of becomes that guy again, that heavily involved PPR option. And again, looking at ADP and what we just talked about, we expect that from him. But yeah, so maybe it would be Tyreek Hill's numbers with 60% going to Juju and 40% going to MVS is probably something that would be acceptable, I think.
I think Juju would like that too, because Juju would probably hit his bonus incentives there. That would give him that 50 to 60 range, and receptions would give him $1 million. If he hits 50 receptions, $1 million. If he hits 65 receptions, $1.5 million. And this is where it gets.
And he's playing for
another contract,
lucrative contract next year for wherever he ends up being.
So if he hits 500 yards too, it's another 500,000. If he hits 650 yards, it's 1 million. 900 yards, 1.5 million. So very incentive driven here for Juju Smith-Schuster. When you have someone playing for incentives like that, they seem to always put it on the field. So I'm going to give.
You see that article today that implied, I think it was from the USA Today actually, that implied that Ronald Jones wouldn't make their roster.
Interesting.
Yeah, they projected their projected 53-man roster, and it was CEH with Jerick McKinnon and the rookie Ronald Jones was left off. So, wow, if that ends up being the case, then I'm going to have to start looking at Clyde Edwards-Helaire again, because I feel like it's really hard for me to get him. As much as I think there's still some potential there, it's really hard for me from a numbers guy to get him top 25. I mean, it's almost impossible just because Jones is sitting there and what we've heard of Andy Reid. But
I would be surprised if they let Jones go. I mean, they brought him in, they got him pretty much near the minimum, 1.5 million.
Yeah, I mean, it's
not of their own possibilities, but
July. You're looking to make headlines and you're looking to throw whatever against the fan, and this is just. It was the Chiefs wire, so you're talking it was probably from an anonymous source or whatever. So it's not anything to put too much credence into. We'll start having a better idea next week and the weeks afterwards when players are actually on the field and we can actually start seeing teams and plays and seeing them in pads, seeing it with our own eyes. But it was something that, just something interesting.
I don't see it. I think that's a headline maker. I think they're just trying to get spicy and make headlines and clickbait, right? If that was the scenario, they wouldn't have waited as long as they did to sign McKinnon, right? They went out and got Ronald Jones pretty quickly. So in my eyes, Ronald Jones is the 1-2 down and goal line back. CEH is also going to be in that mix as well, but we've seen how poor of a job CEH has done in the red zone. Like it's been abysmal. It's been horrible, right? And Ronald Jones has, he's nothing to get, excited about, but a little bit bigger, going to have a little more success in the role. You look down the stretch that year that, we got the name Lombardi Lenny, and they were going to cut.
You might have a decent back if you could somehow combine Ronald Jones and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, huh? Into one guy.
You might get an RB2. It's so true. All right. Any other camp battles you're excited about before we wrap it up tonight?
What about interested? There's some wide receiver 2 battles out there in Dallas. The early
Tolbert
will be on Jalen Tolbert. We're expecting Michael Gallup to probably end up opening the season on the pup or missing at least a month. And then in Indianapolis, our annual time of year to hear these great things about Paris Campbell to where we can all start getting excited about him. But I think as long as he can actually play, which he hasn't done much, Paris Campbell's a fine option out of the slot. But it's Alec Pierce who I'm kind of really, really interested in as the potential wide receiver 2 in Indianapolis. And the more I've been looking at things, Billy, this is an article I think I talked to you about that I'm probably fixing to start working on. Is I want to pick players that are currently well outside top 5, but there's a group of players that I just want to go on a limb and predict that have top 5 upside. Michael Pittman's going to be probably one of my wide receivers. I'm not necessarily he in our full-time projections, we've had him, and this is for a while. We've had him, I think, at wide receiver 9, which is a little higher than where it's going. But I feel, Bill, you and I talked at length about Pittman, and we're both on board with him and the improvement with Matt Ryan. But it's just that if Matt Ryan's wide receiver 1s are averaging, I want to say like 159, 160 targets, somewhere in that range throughout his tenure in Atlanta. Of course, the vast majority of that was Julio Jones, but that kind of like reliance on your top receiver, you really have to like take note of that. And Michael Pittman, he just has that third year breakout that we see out of wide receivers all the time. He has weeks of that. When you look at his projection from rookie to his year number 2, it's exactly the kind of progression that you see in a guy that just completely blows up in year 3. So I'm getting really excited about Pittman, and it just feels like, Billy, it's almost getting that time. I'm so excited, man. We're getting so close to when we start thinking about our Fantasy Pros draft projections and what we're putting together here behind the scenes at Full Time Fantasy. And it's just like, this is like Christmas morning that we used to look forward to back in the 80s and 90s. But like for us in this business that get to do this, that have the privilege of doing this, for a living, that like this is Christmas, and it's just so exciting.
Yeah, I love football season. It never ends for me. It's all year round, but this is where like all the excitement starts building up, right? We get to see
like everyone who knows me, man, every Sunday, like after August knows I call it a work day, but I mean, I do work. I do legitimate work, but being able to watch the Red Zone channel for 10 glorious hours of
commercial-free football begins now.
Yeah, we're also fortunate to be able to do this. And, anyone watching and listening right now, I mean, the fact that you care about a hobby so much so that in the middle of the dead zone here in July, you're still watching us talk about this. It just goes to show me that that anyone watching can really appreciate that we're privileged to be, to have this opportunity, and like I said, it's Christmas. I'm getting excited.
Before we end, there's 2 more things I want to show. So if you have not seen it, Stats Group brings a good point. There's only one team in the entire Player Profiler Championship right now that has a Jonathan Taylor, Pittman, and Ryan Stack. If you have not seen it yet, the Stack tool is now live for FFWC. You can type in players' names, up to 7 at any given time, and you can see who has been selected.
That's a great tool.
Yeah, it's a fantastic tool. It's a good tool to utilize in order to create unique roster construction and create builds. And it's honestly like what I'll do when I'm on the clock. You have 2 players you're trying to choose between, and you're like, okay, do I want in round 3, do I want to take Pittman here, or do I want to take, I don't know, name another receiver, Higgins, right? And let's just say that both of them are sitting there in the face, and you pull up the Stack tool, and you have your first 2 picks entered, and it shows you that 3 teams in the tournament have all 3 of those picks with Pittman, but only 1 team has it with Higgins. What do? You go Higgins, right? Because now it's less owned. So I utilize this tool as a tiebreaker if I'm on players, and it's like if I like the other player, I'm going to take him, or if I'm diversifying, I'm taking a different player. But if I'm on the fence with a player and I want to see how many times it's owned, I pull up my first 2 picks, put them into that 3rd pick that would be or could be, and I make my decision based upon how much.
I don't know, Billy. That sounds pretty awesome. A really, really smart, successful high stake player must have helped come up with that tool idea.
Yeah, it's might have been involved. May have been involved. There was one more thing I want to bring up, and we'll finish the show here tonight. The teams have already started placing players on the pup list. There's 3 names that popped up today that I was, one I'm not, one I wasn't surprised by. Michael Thomas lands on the pup list for camp. One I was surprised was Daniel Bellinger, tight end here for the Giants, and then a third one we're not surprised to see it, but another name to mention is CJ Uzoma. Camp battles are approaching. All those guys could be listed as a camp battle. We'll just set Michael Thomas aside because he's played football in a year and a half. But Bellinger and Ricky Seals-Jones have been battling out a tight end position here, or a starting role, I should say, for the Giants. And then Uzoma signs with the Jets and also battling against Conklin. Do either of these camp battles intrigue you? Is this late round players you're interested in possibly?
I've already thought that Conklin already kind of had the edge. He kind of showed what he can do last year as the
pass catching
unexpected starter for the Vikings, and I've always figured that he was the favorite. And Uzoma was always just kind of a jag, he was just kind of the guy. But Ricky Seals-Jones, the guy that Billy, you and I have talked about, because as normal, we're just waiting on tight end, and he's the guy like, I got a big 20-man roster. I've got to fill on the second tight end, and I'm down in that tight end 28, 29 territory. I'll take a stab at him. But the biggest telling thing on what you just said is the fact that Michael Thomas. Okay, so going back to his original injury in 2020, if you'll remember, he was always kind of like, he might come back this week. It was always like sketchy details on what the injury really was. And for a while, we kept thinking we wouldn't drop him off our rosters because we thought, he'll be back. He's not placed on IR, and then missed the entire season. And then here it is. This year is already more than halfway finished, and he's already on PUP, which is really, really, really highly concerning. And I already have my own issues with New Orleans and Jameis Winston, but this is, very, very telling.
We're telling a year and a half removed from football, and he still can't get on the field. Like, the dude's retired, in my opinion, right now. Like, you might as well just retire. You can't get on the field in this long. He's due for. I mean, it's almost like it's a setback is imminent, right? If he gets on the field, it's just playing full speed. To me, I'm starting to be really concerned about his body now and being able to hold up to the NFL and the beating it's going to take. So, I think it's one thing I'm going to say. It's just pound Chris Olave now moving forward in Jarvis Landry. I think there's going to be steals and drafts. Well, that is it, folks. The Full-Time Fantasy Podcast with Jody Smith and yours truly, Billy Muzio. You can find Jody on Twitter at Jody Smith NFL. You can find me on Twitter at FF Muzio. We'll see you all back here next week. Tomorrow I'm on with Scott Atkins, owner of Full-Time Fantasy and FFWC. We're going to be doing the Red vs. Blue number 3 draft, Player Profiler Championship. That kicks off at 6 my time, 9 o'clock Eastern. Had to do the math in my head for a minute. We'll see you all back then for Red vs. Blue, some drafts, have some players on to talk football, and we'll see you all then. Have a good night, folks.